I shouldn't need anyone. I should be okay on my own. I should. Who says? Like the way that we're set up, like biologically, we are gravitating towards other people. Very much so. We're meant to be in community.
We're pack animals.
Yeah, yeah. And they made this point too. It's not my own, but if the pandemic hasn't proved that to all of us, then we haven't been paying attention.
Hello, everyone.
Welcome back to Queer Joy. I had to cut you off, Keely. I never get to introduce our title.
You know, that's one of the things we actually talk about. Like, listeners don't realize this, but at the end when we talk, I'll be like, hey, we need to like cut each other off more because we're therapists.
Jump in there, you know?
Now we're so used to just being like, oh, yes. Oh, yeah. And how did that make you feel? Oh, and listening attentively and active listening.
Pick it over.
Do it. Take over. Melissa, take over.
Well, I want to start with check-ins because we haven't had an episode in a little minute where it was just you and I. And I know we have a theme in mind, but also maybe we can just check in, let listeners know how we're doing.
Yeah, it's fun getting feedback from listeners actually, because I had a friend of a friend who had mentioned they'd started listening from the beginning. And then all of a sudden they got to like, I don't know if it's episode 9 or 10. And they're like, wait, what? They broke up with the person or they got broken up with? Like they figured out that I was single because the first couple episodes. So that was fun. Yeah, it was fun. So, well, I mean, I will start with an update since you bring that up. Still solo, trying the dating thing, which I think feeds a lot of this idea when we're talking about community, because we're going to bring that up too. We're going to bring up attachment, we're going to bring up community. Yeah, doing the thing, and had a couple like cute little situations. Like I'm realizing is this time around going a lot slower and really recognizing not just what I want as like a person or like what I imagine a person I would date or the people that I would be dating, or even what dynamic. Like right now I'm dating, so it's very non-monogamous and I'm not choosing non-monogamy or polyamory or monogamy. I'm just like existing right now in a
You
dating,
don't have to choose. You're just being.
just being. So which obviously then goes into a lot of what you and I'll talk about too, with mindfulness and just being present. So yeah, I had some good, some fun situations, but as far as like a match, not really. Casually dating someone whose name will not be mentioned, but I do have a person I'm casually dating.
All right. All right.
Given it. So, but yeah, just enjoying life. And so, I'll do my queer joy at the end, like we always do. So, well, what do you want to tell listeners? What should they be updated on with you?
I am still solo. Still solo poly. I'm like now it's funny. I feel like in the first couple episodes we're talking about like who was more interesting. And I'm like, nah, I don't know if my dating life is interesting. I am not dating. I'm on like a app, but I think I may have said this before. I'm on like an app that doesn't prove to have a lot of activity or results. And I think that matches the pace that I'm at right now. Open, not closed off to new connections, but not actively seeking out connection either, with whether that's friends or otherwise. I've taken a little bit of a break from seeing most friends, with the exception of a couple who I know who they're leaving the country. So yeah, I want to spend some time in person, but still in relationship with a partner in California. I know things are getting serious with one of their local partners, which has been exciting. And so we are having conversations about how to start integrating because we've never gotten to meet because I moved so quickly after we started dating.
Oh, yeah.
I haven't gotten to meet my metamor, but that's something I think there's a lot of intention on all sides around. So that'll be virtually. For now, I don't have plans to travel, anytime soon. But yeah, so that's kind of exciting.
Well, that's a great like segue to part of what we're talking about today is attachment and community and bringing those pieces in. So I wondered, I would be love for you to tell listeners how we started on this topic. Do you remember us talking about this and how it started, like the example that you were giving?
Well, I think this may or may not be what you're thinking I'm going to say, but what happened for me was just kind of the stand up moment of the last episode where Alex mentioned secure attachment and that the friendship that we celebrated got to be was a source of secure attachment. That's like where Alex got to experience that for the first time. So the idea of secure attachment has been on my mind. And where it took me was back to the very second episode that we ever did of season one, which was about autonomy and connection. And
Yeah.
I honestly think I'm still grappling with those same concepts. Again, I move slower in my processing. So a year from now, I'll still be thinking about these things. But the reminder that even in secure attachment, like the word attachment is still there. So the idea being that even if we're practicing boundaries and all of that, it's not in this isolated, disconnected from connection
Yeah.
way.
Yes. Well, and that's what interesting is when we think about the attachment itself and how do we manage the emotions. Because something that you were saying had brought up this idea also of how folks can feel really uncomfortable if they're experiencing secure attachment, because if they've never experienced it before or haven't really experienced it much, especially with a romantic partner or sexual partner. And I think, like you're bringing up with Alex, it was such a great example to hear about what secure attachment feels like, because we can model that possibly if we've never felt it in a romantic relationship, but we can draw from what it feels like in a platonic friendship or with a family member, with a mentor. There's so many examples of relationships that we can draw from of the secure attachment. And we focus, I mean, obviously, we are relationship counselors here in MFT, and we do focus on romantic relationships, and that's not the only relationship existing. And so I really thought more, I've been thinking actually this whole weekend, been thinking about this idea of how with trauma, and I don't know, I'm sure there's some work out there or some book, or I haven't finished Polysecure, so I can't quote Polysecure because I don't know if it's in there. But this idea that especially folks who have experienced trauma, and, attachment trauma, early childhood, is this dynamic of either being enmeshed or detaching
Yeah.
or anxious avoidant.
Right. Right.
And so when we think about this push and pull, sometimes we'll hear this idea of people will come in and talk about the relationship and feel this dynamic, this push and pull that can be really intense and kind of exhilarating in a way, but not really healthy, but feels good at
Maybe
that.
good in the moment.
Not sustainable. Good. That's a good point. Not sustainable, but good in the moment. And so this idea that when those are the two extremes that people are experiencing in the dynamic of their relationship, that secure attachment can feel uncomfortable.
Yeah, and I try not to use too many clinical words, and then I do. So here's one of those moments. But thinking about from a family systems perspective, we have this word homeostasis, roughly meaning the pattern that we've all settled into as members of any kind of unit, not necessarily a family, but a friend group, a work, group or whatever. It's the sort of pattern that we've maybe non-verbally agreed upon that like, okay, I'm the person who does this. Your role is to do this. This is how we operate. And so if we've been operating from like our families of origin that may have had all these insecure attachments and different interpersonal traumas and things. Then when we find ourselves in a system where there is secure attachment, it's foreign. This is not the homeostasis we are used to.
Yeah.
So even if it's what we're promoting as like the healthy style of relating, it being so different from what we're used to can be very jarring and very scary. I've had multiple clients come in recently and talking about when's the other shoe gonna drop kind of concept that is teaching our systems that this is another way of relating and being in connection and it's okay. And yeah, it does feel really different, huh?
Well, when you say that idea of when is other shoe going to drop, with folks that have experienced trauma and the central nervous system is on high alert constantly, and so to be the feeling of possible secure attachment is alarming because you're supposed to be on high alert. And
Right.
so when you sink into that, when you attune and sink into a secure attachment, then alarms start going off, going like, wait, When is the next shoe gonna drop? What do I need? I need to be on high alert. What's going on at all times? I need to be on high alert.
And is
So
that related to vulnerability? Is it like I can't, like I have to have my defenses up so that I'm protected when something happens?
possibly, and then if you feel too when you're really vulnerable and then you become a mesh, because then you're also not that's not sustainable either. I like the word, I like going with the word like what's sustainable, because I think these are patterns that we see that people experience when they're like, why am my relationship not working?
Mhm, mhm.
Or the breakup, get back together, breakup, get back together, breakup, get back together.
Yeah, yeah.
Hey everyone, Cardinal the Genuine Solution Magician here. I've got a free worksheet for you if you see yourself in the breakup makeup cycle, or you're waiting for the other shoe to drop, or you just want to practice boundaries that breed connection. Keely and Melissa made a relationship check-in worksheet with 5 exercises to help you determine personal goals from relationship goals, identify possible power dynamics, and gauge your level of vulnerability in your relationships. Complete it alone or with your person or persons of choice. Find it at bit.ly/QRQJ worksheet or by clicking the link in the show notes. Okay, back to the show.
Boundaries is the word that's just screaming at me in my head, and we've talked about how can we not? But once that enmeshment happens, it's like if we're in two bubbles, right? It's like when the bubbles combine and now it's the same, we're all in the same big bubble instead of like having that definitive end to where like I end and you begin.
Yeah. Well, so I wonder too, if speaking more about boundaries, I would you elaborate? Do you have any more thoughts on when talking about boundaries and if someone is working to have that more secure attachment? Because I think the more common, I mean, there are people that are just avoidant
Mhm.
for sure, but really, I think the pattern that comes up more is enmeshed to avoidant, enmeshed to
Yeah.
avoidant.
That pendulum swing. I mean, I would use myself as an example, like highly enmeshed for 10 years. No wonder I don't want to date right now. My system is like, no, but
Like I'm owning it.
yeah, I mean, I'll be totally honest. And that's something I gently challenge for myself, but without like forcing, I also, we've said this before, but like, I don't want the reason I'm connecting with somebody is like because I'm either avoiding myself or I'm avoiding some work I need to do. So like, okay, it's okay to be a little detached right now, but you're right about that pendulum swing. And so, not to say that there can't be variations in our closeness or separateness from the people we're in a relationship with, but maybe not to such extremes. How can we make that sustainable? And boundaries, I guess, to me, the way I've been thinking about them recently is they are a well, I guess being able to set boundaries, it's a tool. It's a tool to be able to stay in a relationship with somebody in a way that feels healthy for both of us.
Yes. And then how do those boundaries like, okay, my Virgo brain, again, I'll just own it because I know this isn't the only way to do it. And so maybe when I give some examples that I've been talking to clients about, you may also have other examples that aren't so scheduled or rigid. But like today, I did a post on TikTok because I was on the beach, which will be, more on queer joy. But I did a TikTok video talking about how when you're on vacation with your spouse or your partner or partners, that it's really helpful to plan time away from each other.
Mhm.
So that's one of the things when I think about boundaries. And I think also part of it is this can be a dynamic in all lengths of relationships, but I think that I also, which I want to be aware of, is I tend to think about longer term relationships, whether they're monogamous or poly. And so that dynamic of going on vacation or going on break, but that can happen anytime. Like you
Mhm.
can, I mean, there's a term. No, I think it's called a baecation. That was some of the dating. A baecation is when you just somebody and then you go on a vacation.
Oh my gosh.
I think no matter what amount of time you've known someone, having that scheduled time. And so then I think to also not just vacation, but anytime is having those, and we've talked about this a little bit, but having specific breaks or being able to, I mean, I hear people talk about having challenges living together and when they're both at home, just doing their separate things. Like
Right.
like being confused or conscientious, wondering like, okay, should I leave my person alone or should I go do my own thing? What should I be
Yeah.
doing? Like really, really clearly struggling with structure and boundaries at home.
Yeah.
And I think a really good example of that, because I remember I just started dating somebody, not the person now, but I was dating someone and we didn't know each other that well and we were on vacation and there's a lot of emotions and it was tense, whatever. And that morning I woke up and I'm like, she was kind of in a mood or I don't know what was going on. And I got up and I was like, I'm going to go take a run. I'm gonna because normally I'd be like, "Oh, do you wanna go on a walk with me? We're at the beach. Do you wanna do this? Do you wanna do that?" And I was like, "No, I'm gonna go on a run."
Yeah.
And so I went on a run and got back, and we were both like, "That was good.
That's awesome. That's
That
so cool.
was what we should have done."
Yeah.
But you don't know that if you don't experience that and lean into the uncomfortableness because you won't know what it feels like the end piece because doing the right thing doesn't always feel comfortable.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, and it sounds like say that had gone like poorly for some reason or you gotten back and there was a negative like reception to that. Like, why did you go out? Like,
Yeah.
maybe that's an opportunity to, and we talked about this. So if you haven't listened, go back to season one. The expectations. Like, all right, oh, is there an expectation that we do everything together, that we start every day together? What are the expectations we have? And again, those can be built in friendships, romantic relationships, like I mean, it's good to unpack expectations, I think, of any kind of relationship. But I think that was a good example of there wasn't an expectation and you actually both benefited from what happened. And we're able to like recognize that and be like, cool, awesome.
And throughout that relationship, like that's something we went back to actually, where we would be in situations, whether it was at her house, at my house, out doing whatever, we would go back to that example and be like, oh, that was really helpful. And then and say, okay, I'm going to take a night away from you. Or even in one of those episodes, I think we've even brought up again where different couples would say that they would go on friend vacations,
Mhm.
like have this separate time away from their partner.
And remembering that just because we're separate doesn't mean we're not in connection. Even
Yeah.
if we're not talking, we're still connected to the people. And that's something I've been thinking about too, about boundaries, I guess. I think I've recently used and thought about boundaries as ways to keep people out, which like, I don't know about that. Again, that has this defensive, like, I don't know, feeling to it. But
Yeah.
boundaries are a way of giving space for the individual processing or whatever needs to happen. But just because I'm not in constant communication with somebody doesn't mean I can't be connected to them. I'm thinking about them and even respectful of like what they may be needing and not, I guess what I'm trying to talk about here to really distill it down is like this kind of white concept of individualism and individuality and not being in community and the way that boundaries, at least in conversations I've been having, both my talking about myself and with other white people, it's like this boundary of like, no one can mess with me. I'm going to shut the world out and do my own thing. And like, that's, I don't know. I think that's a really unhelpful concept that like we as white folks need to unpack more. And that's not like the cultural standard or norm for our other folks. And that links to me to boundaries because I think boundaries are a way to like push people out when really I think it's more about how we teach people how to be in connection with us.
Well, that's that in between, and I was just that's what I was gonna say is I feel like, I mean, even you and I can kind of debate if you're recognizing yourself to be more of on a detached, avoidant type path right now, and I know my history, just like most people trying to find the balance of the 2, I definitely can see I've had moments of enmeshment,
Yeah.
and I'm thinking that relationship is enmeshment, and, you and I had just listened to that beautiful episode, Finding Our Way, and I love the quote by Prentice Hemphill that talks about the that boundaries is the ability to then love myself and love you simultaneously, and really making boundaries not about shutting someone out, but about having the duality of like holding both, holding space for both.
Right. And here's the irony is when we can get strong in our boundaries, meaning we're confident in them and we feel comfortable expressing them and we know the language we want to use to express them, perhaps it doesn't feel so scary to be in connection with folks because we're not risking enmeshment if we have that ability to say, oh, actually, no, that's not for me.
Yeah. And then you actually you have to have taken that time to know what you actually want or be
Yeah.
able to say what you actually want.
Yep.
Eh, There was this, we've heard some yummy things about no, like feeling good about saying no. And actually, in that interview, so on that podcast episode, the person was interviewing Mia Birdsong. And at one point, she says, when I say no to someone, it's giving them information. They're getting to know me. And that was so cool to think about that when you're building this idea of like, if we're talking about building community and we're talking about boundaries and we're having, building secure attachment in romantic relationships with the idea of a broader community. That when we tell people no about something, that means they get more information about us, which isn't that what we want in connection, is for people to truly see us and truly know us.
Well, howdy, partner. Cardinal, the podcast cowboy, here to tell you that when I get lonely on the trail, I turn to my trusty Air Pulse vibrator from As You Like It Sex Toy Shop. They're eco-conscious too. Find them online at asyouLikeItShop.com and use code CTC Therapy, all one word, at checkout for 10% off. That's CTC Therapy at asyouLikeItShop.com. Time for me to mosey on.
I had a client come in who they're so self-aware and they've done a lot of their own research around attachment and all of these concepts we're talking about and it can sometimes, as I do, get into like an intellectualized place with it where it's like we're all up here almost in like with danger of going into like what it should be based on all the theory and all the books I've read and all the podcasts I've listened to. And then we realize, like, let's put this in context into where you are in the relationship. This is somebody like you've just met. It's okay that you have to like name your boundaries. It's actually like expected. I would say that you would have to explain to somebody some of your boundaries and how you work because they don't know you. I think the expectation to watch out from is that everyone you interact with is going to just automatically know how you want to be treated.
Oh my gosh. And making assumptions that people want to be treated the same as I want to be treated. That's not true. I mean, even like I was just thinking, I don't know if this is a silly example, but even going on dates. And I remember at one point me saying, I'm ready to go now. I'm getting tired. And I enjoyed this person and I actually planning to go on another date, but I was tired.
Yeah.
And like time it was a simple boundary, but then they got to know, we had a joke of like finding out that both of us are actually not super late people. I'm a total morning person. And so me saying, hey, I'm ready to end this moment, of connection, gave them information about me. Oh, you're a morning person. Oh, you need to.
Yeah.
But I could, there's other times that just wanting to stay in that connection
Mhm.
could drag it out for hours more
Yeah.
and then be tired and like, what is the point of that?
Right. It makes me think of what we talked about we're just referencing old episodes today, but the meaning making, I swear I'm not that great at like marketing. I'm like, no, listen to everything. But these are the same themes, right? That underlie all of this. But the meaning making that we do, and that being a caveat, like, this person could have made some meaning out of like, oh wow, Keely needs to go home early. That means I'm a bad date. I'm not interesting. I'm not
Yes.
the
Good point.
we decide based on our own attachment insecurities.
Yes.
Nothing to do with the other person at all.
Well, and I think, I want to go back to the idea of recognizing, as I'm speaking as a white person and thinking about individuality and how these boundaries are so much about cutting off or like, you know, protection almost. I mean, like a castle on a hill with a moat and like
Yeah, truly.
armed up. And one of the other pieces, listening about community was this phrase about how community is like a body and it's breathing and it has this pulse. And I wonder, when we're sitting here talking about connection, we're talking about attachment, we're talking about all these pieces. And when we're in our bodies and we're attuning, what does that feel like? Or how do we've talked about, okay, we have all these boundaries or all these ideas if you tend towards more of the enmeshment.
Mhm.
But then if we're looking at it from like a very cultural white culture, capitalism, that patriarchy, I mean, the white man that goes off and lives on his own, like, what then are the ways when we're wanting to draw ourselves more into community, or if someone tends to be more avoidant or not as attached, or starts getting attached and then pulls the other direction?
Yeah. Yeah, I think at least where my mind immediately goes is part of it is recognizing the system that we're in and that was something that we have learned and we've been bred to be individualistic. It's almost like this, like, I got to fend for myself to be okay in this world. And then you add on layers of, just the layers of experience. There's another layer if you're a queer person. There's another layer if your skin isn't white. There's all these different layers to which there's these protections kind of built up along the lines of what you were talking about in that same episode. I really would recommend listeners go find that episode. Again, the podcast is Finding Our Way, and the episode is Community and Belonging. But this comes up in session all the time. They named shame. Underlying most trauma is shame, and they even made the point of the shame of needing other people. We are ashamed of needing other people. I hear this all the time, like, I shouldn't need anyone. I should be okay on my own. I should. Who says? Like, the way that we're set up, like, biologically, we are gravitating towards other people. Very much so. We're meant to be in community.
We're pack animals.
Yeah, yeah. And they made this point too. It's not my own, but if the pandemic hasn't proved that to all of us, then we haven't been paying attention.
Yeah.
Right? Those of us who are really struggling, not being, even myself as like introvert, really comfy being alone. Like, yeah, I miss people. I miss the random conversation. I know that because I'm like chatting up the grocery store clerk for like 10 minutes just because I'm like, do you have anything interesting to say to me today?
I know those grocery store clerks and like gas station attendants, like they're almost like their own type of therapist during this pandemic.
I need it. Like, I need them. I need those like spontaneous random, interactions. But
Yeah.
yeah, so like, let's unpack that. How can we release the shame of needing other people and make that be okay? And also make that, again, what's the meaning we're making? Doesn't mean that we're weak. Doesn't mean that we're failing. It doesn't mean any of those things. That's what maybe capitalism has taught us, or like white American culture has taught us. Right.
Patriarchy for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
White supremacy, patriarchy, like those all capitalism that all comes together.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can really create havoc because if we, that's really like the conceptually like mutual aid as well. And when we can help each other and not rely, because the system's broken. And so how do we help each other? These attachments or these community, this building community and asking for help and talking to each other, then again supports this more healthy, stable attachment to a romantic partner, because you're not just getting your needs met by one person.
Sadly, the stakes aren't so high. It's not all for that person.
Because that idea that we're all that this one person's going to fulfill us, and we talk about this so much. The solution, though not an easy one, is how do we ask from our community? How do we, we're having a bad day, or, and I think the asking in this situation, yes, it could be about asking for grabbing something from the grocery store. Something that was one of the stories they told. But really, like when we're wanting comfort, connection through like either going somewhere enjoyable, going for a walk, venting, having a bad day, emotional support, like spreading all of that around and building that connection so that, again, yeah, our romantic partner, life partner, whoever is not the only person
Right.
because
Right.
that causes issues with attachment.
It does.
That is the opposite.
One of the things I think that's important, and maybe just a rephrase of the question is, how do we allow people to support us?
Yeah. Yeah.
How do we allow that to happen? Because oftentimes there are people reaching out to support, like, hey, let me know if you need anything.
Yeah.
No, I'm okay. I don't need it. I'm okay. Right. Or I'm afraid to tell my friends because they already have their own stuff. I don't want to burden them. Right. When truly, oftentimes when we come together, there's a mutual benefit. Like being able to help someone feels really great, at least for me personally. And I know I've heard this from clients too. If I'm really going through something, and somebody comes to me, and again, we can have consent and boundaries over what I have the bandwidth for, like yay for all of that. But oftentimes, if I am put in a position to get to help somebody, it makes me feel better in that moment.
Sure.
So allowing that to be true, allowing these communities to build by mutually offering, but also receiving support.
So I think this is a continued theme and actually a plug for our upcoming workshop on February 12th from 12 to 2 p.m. We will be going more into this because this is not the end of this conversation around building community and having this idea of building community, a way to increase secure attachment, to learn what secure attachment feels like, and to really have this balance or this idea of how we continue to care for ourselves, but also be available and open to caring for others and allowing others to help us as well. So I think it all ties in, and this is not the last time we're going to talk about this. Well, so in light of how we started today, Melissa, I think you should go first for Queer Joy.
Take away the queer joy.
Take it away.
Well, I had a great weekend. The thing that's coming most to mind for me is I did another solo date. And it was maybe a little bit more planned than I usually do. That I was like, what I haven't done yet that I plan to do is I need to do a clean sweep. Just since I moved into my newer apartment, my closet especially, there's like all these clothes that I'm like, I don't know if I wear all of these. Like I need to kind of go back through and do some purging. But with that, and with my recent kind of gender exploration I've been talking about a little bit, I totally realized we didn't do introductions. Well, I hope you'll
Forgot
have to listen to the other episode.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, I
that's
didn't
so
think of
funny.
that. No.
Well,
No.
it's
Needless to say, I am very gender fluid. I'm using she, they pronouns and exploring different parts of me. And I'm realizing like my wardrobe really kind of sucks for that. Like there's like one euphoric outfit for like a certain way that I might be feeling. And like I just can't wear that shirt every day. So like especially when we're recording the podcast, I know so many people are just listening, but for anyone who's getting the visual on YouTube, like I don't want to be wearing the same exact thing every day.
or the clips, even if they don't.
Right, that's true. I have clips on social media. So I went on a like gender affirming shopping date with myself, and
Nice.
I went thrifting, and for me, gosh, it was a very new experience to be shopping in a men's section with like no, like it all clearly cis men around. And watching their reactions, everyone was super like there was nothing jarring or like weird that happened, but it just was like a double take, like where? Oh, okay, So that was really interesting, but it was so, like I said, affirming. I think it's a great self care. I think it's great self love. I feel awesome. I now have like a different shirt to wear, which I'm pumped about. So yeah, it was really wonderful, Queer Joy.
Awesome. Well, I have multiple queer joys, but my queer joy that I'm gonna share is just from going to the beach with a friend and being able to spontaneously just be in the moment and be in this place in nature that I love. And somehow it's like sunny.
Amazing.
And there was this moment, this is like great moment. We're driving and they turn on 90s, like a Spotify 90s. And I'm just like, we're both rocking out and like dancing, like in the car. I mean,
Oh,
it's a
yeah.
dance, like moving.
So you've got
I
all the
thought,
people driving around you moving too.
realize, and I'm just sitting there being like, and then, we start telling stories about like our high school situations, because this is like music from like the 90s. So I was, 90s, my high school and not even only part of my college experience. So like high school, partly college. And it's just like all reminiscent and like telling our stories of like who, just all the queer closeted stuff. It was like, it was just such a beautiful moment, and it was just such a beautiful weekend, and it went by so fast, but it was just wonderful. But I do want to mention though, because there was, people can probably relate, being on the Oregon coast, I did stop at a gas station like in Salem, and like one of the bathrooms was closed. So there was one that's marked ladies or women. And then it has this handwritten sign that says ladies only.
Oh,
And I was like, and I wish I didn't even have my phone on me, because I was like, it was a really weird, I was just like, what the fuck is going on? Like,
yeah.
what does this even mean? But because the rest of the weekend was so great, I was able to like step away from that. But that was a really weird,
Yeah.
because I'm like, what? I can't use this bathroom.
Right.
I'm definitely not a lady.
Yeah.
What, are you checking her genitals?
Yeah. Like, how are you?
Their
What,
lineup?
yeah.
Like,
How do you define lady? Let's have a conversation about that before I pee.
I know, what is going on here? So that was a weird, strange moment. Really, obviously, really fucking not queer joy, but the rest of the weekend was such queer joy that it's just like, I
Yeah.
was able to kind of
Yeah.
like leave that at that bathroom
Yeah.
and enjoy the rest of the
I
weekend.
think that's how I felt about the shopping situation. Although now that you say it, I'm like, what? Because all the racks were labeled women's or men's.
Yeah. Oh
Like,
yeah.
what, could we at least like go to like fem energy, mask energy? Like, could we just switch it to that for a minute?
That would be amazing if everything's
like,
like labeled by
Neutral,
energy.
gender neutral, and like like
If you're feeling this today, then here's
right.
the outfit for you.
Or like just not label fucking any of it and let people pick out their own damn clothes from wherever they are, like shirts, pants. Like, just
Can we have a size that isn't like, can we just have like universal sizing, please?
Yeah.
Like just like based on measurements? Yeah, all the things, all the things. Well, I guess we could have a episode one day about clothing.
that's enough.
Maybe that's a TikTok or an Instagram post. Anyway, well, thank you all for joining. And Melissa, just another great week of podcasting and interesting topics. The other workshop that's coming up is on March 25th, which is going to be our polyamory workshop. And then after that, we're going to have an 8-week beginner's course of specifically closed group on polyamory. So really excited. We have a bunch of things updated. So please, please, please give us your feedback. If you tell us what's going on, maybe we'll share your story if you want us to share your story. And otherwise, I hope you all have a great, queer, and joyful week.
Thanks for listening to Queer Relationships, Queer Joy, a podcast by the Connective Therapy Collective. Hosted by Keely C. Helmick and Melissa DeSeguran, with audio edited and produced by me, Cardinal Marking. Intro music is by Bad Snacks. Outro music by Victoria Instrumental. If this episode made you smile or think, tell us about it. If you hated it, tell us about that. Review us on iTunes or Spotify. Yes, you can review on Spotify now. Or send us an email at info@connectivetherapycollective.com. For information on our workshops and for more queer joy, visit our website at connectivetherapycollective.com. Love ya. Bye.